Hi everyone and welcome. I want to talk about death today, everyone's favorite topic. When we hear the word death, most of us think of the death of the physical body. I would like to expand this to also talk about the death of the egoic or psychological self. We fear death because we fear the loss of this egoic self. Think about it. If we believed with absolute conviction that our self would survive the death of the physical body, we wouldn't be afraid of death at all. The inspiration for this video was Rupert Spira's recent video entitled, "We Are Not Born and Never Die." I'll provide a link for that in the description. In this talk, I will begin by defining the concept of the deathless, explore how it's realized, and talk about some concrete practices. Death meditation has two outcomes. First, we see the impermanent nature of the physical body and mind, and therefore overcome attachment to it. This releases our fear of death and enables us to enjoy life in each moment. Secondly, through death meditation, we can directly see what we truly are is beyond the body and mind. We transcend the egoic mind and physical body and realize the deathless. Let's explore each of these and delve into how the deathless is realized. At the end of the video, I'm going to detail how directly seeing the deathless is equivalent to enlightenment. We can learn to accept our inevitable death, see impermanence, and recognize it as a natural part of life. The practice of awareness of death allows us to confront our fears directly and awaken to the impermanence of all things, including our body and the mind. This can bring us a lot of peace in our lives. In awareness of death practice, we begin to see that the birth and living and death are all part of our existence. All parts are then acknowledged and accepted. And in this acceptance, we discover deeper peace and contentment with the natural flow of life. It can lessen our attachment to the body-mind formation and to things in the world. This can reduce suffering and increase appreciation for the life we're living. We may begin to see each moment as precious. And there's also a deeper death practice that I want to talk about that enables us to see our true unborn and deathless nature. The egoic self is afraid of dying, and since the death of the physical body is associated with the death of the egoic self, it's terribly afraid. Humans are caught in this illusion of a separate self that intensely fears physical death, and it'll go to any length to sustain itself. And since it can't avoid physical death, it's deeply afraid. It's invented all kinds of religious beliefs to avoid facing death and to rationalize it's something that it continues after death. Enlightenment is closely linked to death, as true liberation requires dying before we physically die, shedding our egoic self and letting go of everything we hold on to as our identity. This involves surrendering completely to the present moment and relinquishing our attempts to control and manipulate life. Ramana Maharshi's enlightenment story illustrates the benefits of death contemplation. When he faced a sudden fear of death at the age of 17, he asked himself what it meant and imagined his own death. By imitating a corpse and realizing that only his consciousness was real, he transcended the fear of death and dwelled permanently in the deathless, beyond the body. I would like to emphasize that no one is truly born or dies, and instead it's merely conditions of the mind that are changing. The mind's attachment to the world of perception, thought, feeling, and memory, and the material world creates the illusion that we are being born and dying. Realizing the deathless involves awakening to the fact that birth and death are mere appearances resulting from our attachment to the senses. The enlightened never die, in the sense that they have awakened to the self beyond the cycle of birth and death. In the teachings of the Buddha, birth and death are seen as I said, mere appearances resulting from the mind's belief in and attachment to them. The construct of our perception of the world, including birth and death, is created by our minds and our six senses. The patterns of our reality continually change and arise, taking shape and dissolve within our field of experience. Awakening to the deathless state requires exploring and realizing the statement that Krishnamurti made. There is nobody born, there is nobody who dies, only conditions of mind that change. Our experience of the world is constructed by the mind, which is constantly changing. However, what is the ultimate reality that knows the world? It is this quality of knowing, which is formless and beyond individuality, time, location. When we embody this awakened awareness, we realize the deathless and are liberated from our identification with being born and dying. When the Buddha said that the mindful do not die, he meant that the mind, when awake, is not identified with being born and dying. It is timeless, unborn, undying, outside the realm of time and space. And this may seem impossible to comprehend, as we're so used to thinking in terms of progression and location and time. But when we let go of our identification with being a person in a particular place, passing through time, the puzzle solves itself. The mind can then be free from time, location, and individuality, and the true nature of the world can be known. By letting go of our identification with this egoic self, we can achieve immortality. And this doesn't mean that the me or the egoic self goes on forever, but rather that we see ourselves as transparent, as not self. The awakened mind is always present. The challenge is to resist the egoic's mind, then to claim, I am unborn. Instead, we must break through the illusion of appearances and awaken to the true freedom and radiance of life. To understand death, we must first realize that our body and mind are mere localized expressions of infinite consciousness. When our body-mind dies, we do not cease to exist. We simply return to infinite consciousness, that which we came from. To help explain this, there's a metaphor that I often use. It's a wave in the ocean. A wave is merely the localized expression of the ocean. And when it hits the shore and dissolves, it returns back to the ocean, its true nature. Similarly, our body-mind are waves that appear for a period of time and eventually dissolve back into consciousness. When we die, the ego is forced to drop away, leaving only the deathless. All body, mind, ego activity ceases, and we are left only with our essential nature. In this sense, death can be seen as forced enlightenment. But how can we attain immortality in this lifetime? The answer lies in non-identification with a separate self, realizing we are not separate from the infinite. By doing so, we awaken to our true nature and attain immortality. Death is simply a transition from one form of existence to another, our true nature. Consciousness goes on and on. And it's important to remember that none of what I'm saying here is something to be believed. The ego can take statements such as those that I'm making and make up a whole story about it. It will survive death as consciousness. The deathless can only be realized in our direct experience, free from the conditioning and filtering of the conceptual egoic mind. It is a direct, unmediated seeing of reality as it is. I'm going to produce a separate video where I'll offer 3 practices that can evoke this non-identification and a direct realization of the deathless. So look for that. And thanks for your attention. Please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate that. And hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. And I hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone, and be well.